What's cooking, adventurers? Today we've got something special. Not as tough as the energy video though. There is a little math involved, but nothing you can't handle. Basically, we're going to cover one specific topic, how to maximize or increase your DPS right now. We'll break down the fundamentals of elemental damage, where you can actually find it, how to figure out which element you should be using, and we'll get super specific about insignias, plus another deep dive on circuits. With that said, let's dive in. Alright, first off, let's talk a bit about the fundamentals of elemental damage. Time for my special board to show up, the one you'll love way too much, here we go. Alright, so, another content creator, Gids, made an absolute banger of a video explaining how elemental damage works. That means I don't have to go deeper on the explanations, since there's already a killer video out there, link in the description. What you really need to know is this: for every 10 points of enhancement attribute, your elemental damage goes up by about 4.5%. And this is the important information that we're gonna keep out of his video. Here's the thing, you can get elemental damage from all over the game, but unless you actually activate it, you get nada. For example, if you stack 40 points of Pyro enhancement, in my case for instance, you won't get that tasty 18% flat damage boost unless your attacks do elemental damage. So, how do you activate it? There are 3 ways. Number 1, craft an elemental version of your weapon. This makes your attacks and skills deal elemental damage, so you finally get that bonus. Number 2, equip an elemental insignia. It does the same thing, turns all your attacks and skills into elemental damage. And number 3, use a potion that activates elemental damage. All 3 methods do the same thing, they convert your normal and skill damage into elemental damage, unlocking those sweet bonuses. Now that we've nailed the basics, let's tackle the big question: which element is best for your class? How do you figure it out? I'm not about to spoon-feed you a chart for every single class, that's not how we roll here. My goal isn't to turn you into copy-paste zombies, I want you to understand the game and make smart choices, especially since things might change in the future. Here's how you do it. First, check your character skills. If any skill deals elemental damage, it usually is shown clearly in the skill description. For example, Starbreaker, some skills do pyro damage. Bounty Hunter, she rocks multiple elements in her kit. Berserker and Magician, nada, no elemental damage on their skills. In this particular case, I am on my gunner, and my gunner does also electro damage on some skills, and in some others does also, this is also electro, and some other skills, let me find them, and some other skills do pyro damage as well. So what then? You check as well your gear. Take Berserker for example. If you look at his high tier ring, you'll notice it boosts one of his main DPS skills, of course, that not only turns your damage into Pyro, but also stacks on an extra 55 Pyro enhancement, which is roughly a 20% damage increase on that specific skill. That's massive, right? So Pyro is easily the top element for Berserker, since it's the only way to stack that kind of bonus. In this particular case we're talking about Berserker, and the only piece of gear that actually has to do something with elemental boost damage, it's the ring, and none of his skills actually have an elemental damage boost, so it feels like Pyro is the only way. If you're running Gunner, you'll notice some of your items boost both Pyro and Electro enhancement. This gives you more options, but the principle stays the same. Match your element to your gear as well for huge DPS gains, but only try to focus one specific element. But it's not always cut and dry. Some classes, like Magician, don't get elemental bonuses from skills or gear. For those, you're free to pick whatever element you want, but you won't get any extra boosts, so your total damage potential from elemental damage might be lower. The bottom line is always check both your skills and your gear to figure out which element actually benefits your class. If there is a special boost, use it. If there isn't, pick your favorite and go wild. Alright, so you've picked your element, great, but remember, just having that element isn't enough. You actually need to activate it to get those juicy bonuses. Most classes get a decent chunk of attribute enhancement by default. sometimes 20 or even 40 points, just from gear. That's an easy 10 to 20% damage boost just waiting for you. Don't let it rot away unused. So let's break it down so you know how to squeeze out the most DPS. If you pick an elemental weapon, it activates your elemental bonuses. That means you don't need an elemental insignia, your weapon's doing the work. Having an elemental insignia at max level and you'll get 18 attribute enhancement, which is about an 80%, 8.1 flat increase to both your basic and skill damage. But there's a twist. There is also a weapon insignia that boosts physical and magical damage by 10%. That's 2% more than the elemental route. So, if you go elemental weapon, grab that physical magic insignia for the extra punch, and this should be your priority as it comes to weapon insignia. Now if you're using a critical weapon like I do, you probably have 20 to 30 attribute enhancement just sitting there wasted. But if you slap on an elemental insignia, say a Pyro insignia, you activate those sweet bonuses. That's about an 8% boost from the insignia itself at max level, plus another 10% or so from your existing attribute enhancement that you couldn't get otherwise. Suddenly your DPS is looking a lot less anemic. We are talking about at least a 10% increase just from a level 1 insignia. For instance, by activating my insignia, my Pyro insignia on my Berserker, right now I'm on the Gunner, but it doesn't really matter, you will get it. Here we have like 30 Pyro enhancement, which is 13.8 Pyro damage. Only the skills that the Gunner has by default with Pyro element, those skills will benefit from the Pyro enhancement, but everything else won't. So, by activating the elemental damage, depending on which element you choose, of course, and it should be prioritized as I explained earlier. In that specific case, by playing a critical weapon, I will also get the benefit from the insignia, which is gonna boost me by 8% my overall damage, and as well 13.8% from the Pyro enhancement attribute that was sitting here alone. So we're talking about 20% increased damage just by placing a golden insignia on your weapon, right? At this point of the video, I wanted also to point that for situations like mine, where we have a lot of attribute enhancement sitting there, and we know that we will boost our damage by like 20 to 25% just by getting one of those. If you're unlucky as me and haven't get one yet, that maybe we should get one even if it's like 10 million gold. It's 20% damage increase, so why not? Now if you want to go full tryhard, you can use an elemental insignia on your main slot and a physical magic boost insignia on your combat slot. And activate the elemental damage with a potion when you want to push for leaderboards. This sweet combo nets you about 2% extra damage on top, super useful for leaderboard pushes or burning through those hex raids. But the downsides, these potions are pricey and kind of a pain to craft. That's why you want both insignias equipped for convenience. Use the element on every content, and when you feel pushing for rankings, you switch to the extra 2% while utilizing potions. Just something to keep in mind. So to sum up, using the elemental weapon, use physical magic insignia. Using the critical weapon, use elemental insignia and maybe potions for min-maxing. Potions give you a bit more attribute enhancement, no matter your build, so using those to elemental weapon builds as well is still a smart choice. Don't let those free upgrades go to waste, trust me, nothing haunts you like wasted DPS. Alright, one last thing about elemental damage, you've also got circuits, specifically the stellar ones. These are special because their main stat can be elemental damage, skill damage or basic attack damage. Here's what you need to know for quick optimization. At max level, that's level 20, you'll get a 4% boost if you pick basic attack damage as your main stat, same goes for skill damage as I have right now. But if you're all about those elements and you've activated the elemental damage, grabbing the elemental main stat nets you 10 attribute enhancement on max level. That's roughly a 4.5 increase to both basic attack and skill damage. Tasty, right? So using the right elemental circuit amps up your overall DPS, since the bonus applies to all attack types, not just one. Now I'm not going to deep dive into circuits right now, I'm planning a full breakdown in an upcoming video, stat nerds, get ready. But if you are reaching endgame, now that's the time to start optimizing your circuits. If you haven't already, death waits for no one, and neither does the leaderboard. From here I'm gearing up for class guides. We're gonna start probably from next week, starting with Berserker. I've got 3 nearly done, but I'm holding off to make them even sharper. The more I learn, the better tips I'll bring you. And that's a wrap for today. If you found this helpful, drop a like or hit the comments. Thanks for watching, and until next time, don't let your DPS rest in peace. See ya!